Siftpop podcast is recorded in front of a live internet audience.
Live from a bunker in the heart of the Ozarks. When you look into a pool of water, you might just see our reflection instead of yours. It's Siftpop.
That could be for either movie.
That's true. I didn't even think about that. I was more referencing Silence. I thought it might be a little sacrilegious considering he saw Jesus in the reflection as opposed to himself. But
exactly.
Anyhow, welcome to Siftpop. We're streaming live on Mixlr every Friday or available to download later in your podcast feed, unless, of course, you're a patron.
Patrons get perks.
Yeah, they do. I'm Aaron Dicer from YourMovieFriend.com. I'm joined by Andrew Ormsby from Flick Freaks.
Ahoy!
Every week we'll be joined by a pop culture guru, or most every week, to chat about movies, television, and whatever else from the pop culture universe is on our minds.
We could get Google Assistant to be our guru.
We tried that on my other podcast.
It was so fun.
And I didn't think it worked out all that well, but you had a good time with it?
Oh, it was so fun. Did you edit like pauses in between like her answering
Yes,
stuff?
yeah. She doesn't answer that quick.
Because
I just didn't want to
man, she is on the dot with those answers.
No, I did. I edited that down a little bit because I didn't want to have to wait through the pauses. But
sure, okay.
But no, every once in a while, it's nice to do the two of us and just kind of talk through a movie and talk about pop culture.
I like talking to you, Aaron. I'm glad you let me come
You're my
barge
buddy.
into your house every single week.
You're my pal.
Yeah.
We've got a really fun show. We're going to, of course, do some Do We Care at the beginning, and then we'll talk a little bit about a couple movies. Silence, which both of us have seen, Martin Scorsese's new movie about 17th century priests who go to Japan. Then we'll talk a little bit about A Dog's Purpose, which only I have seen. And then we'll do a best ever challenge on Martin Scorsese movies. So we'll pick our top 3 Scorsese films, chat about it, have some fun doing that. And of course, we'll finish with some buried treasure. But first, Andrew's got some Do We Care.
Different this week, actually. Instead of Do We Care, it's a bit of a spin-off thing of We Care Deeply, something that we obviously do care about.
I wondered if you would do this.
Only one topic this week, the passing of Mary Tyler Moore.
Yeah. What's your connection to Mary Tyler Moore?
My mom is one of the most avid Mary Tyler Moore fans ever, and this really hit her hard. She grew up watching, obviously, the Mary Tyler Moore Show, but also Dick Van Dyke, which she was a part of for 7 years, and then the Mary Tyler Moore ran for, I think, 7 years as well. And then it was Ordinary People was the movie she was nominated for an Oscar for Best Leading Actress.
Yeah, she was in a few movies.
Yeah, so it obviously didn't affect me all that much, but I know that I'm part of, not Generation X, whatever they want to call us now, Generation Y or whatever. What are we called?
I don't know.
Yeah, we're that new generation.
Millennial.
Millennials, yeah. Even though
I'm not a millennial, I'm a Gen X.
I wish I was Gen X, man. I'm at the beginning of millennials.
I'm so jealous of your generation.
No, honestly, because I know we're getting off on a tangent here, but
that's never happened.
But millennials have like a bad reputation right now, and I'm like, but I'm on like the edge of it. So
yeah,
but
you're not defined by your generation,
hey,
Andrew Ormsby.
Thanks, buddy.
You get just to be you.
But what I mean before this whole thing went off is I'm part of a generation that really wasn't immersed in Mary Tyler Moore or Dick Van Dyke, so it didn't affect me as much as, say, like my parents' generation, or I don't know. Did you grow up even knowing Mary Tyler Moore?
Do you know what my favorite TV show of all time is?
Is it the Dick Van Dyke Show?
It's the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
it is. If you have never watched an episode of the Dick Van Dyke Show,
like 1 or 2,
just go back and maybe watch about 6 of them, and you just get a sense for how much fun they were having, the chemistry of this cast. It is down the line, amazing comedians and actors. Dick Van Dyke is absolutely incredible in it, but Mary Tyler Moore is just radiant. I mean, she's just incredible. She was 24 when that show started.
Wow.
And Dick Van Dyke talks about, not being sure if she was going to be able to have the comedy chops, to pull it off. But he said within, 1 or 2 episodes, it was already obvious she may have been the funniest one on the cast. So it's spectacular stuff. It was way ahead of its time, and it's my favorite TV show of all time. So yeah, I was really sad when I heard this.
Oh man, what a career if you just look back at everything she did. I would put her up there with like the likes of Lucille Ball.
Yeah.
And all those other comedic icons that really paved the way for strong, funny women that are just, and not only just women, but comedians in general.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know that you could make a, top 10 television personality list without her on it. I mean, with the success she had on TV, it's mind-blowing. It's incredible. Yeah. So
that's all I had for We Care Deeply.
She will be missed.
Incredible.
For sure. I did want to revisit something we talked about in Do We Care last week with The Dog's Purpose, but I think let's save it for when we're talking about the movie.
Sure.
Because we talked a little bit about the controversy, those kind of things, and I think there's been some more context that has come out. So we'll chat about that once we get to that movie. But first, let's talk a little bit about Silence.
Ferreira is lost to us. He renounced God in public and surrendered the faith.
That's not possible. Father Ferreira risked his life to spread our faith all over Japan.
It seems to me that our mission here is more urgent than ever. We must go find Father Ferreira.
This is in your hearts, then, both of you?
Yes.
Then I must trust God has put it down. The moment you set foot in that country, you step into high danger.
Silence is the story of 17th century priests who go to spread the gospel to Japan, in a Japan that is very much against Christianity, and what happens when the persecution there. They actually go not just to spread the gospel, they actually go to look for a priest who had already gone there, played by Liam Neeson, and rumor had it that had gotten back to him that he had apostatized, which means renounced his faith.
Yeah.
And they couldn't believe it, so they wanted to go find what had happened and also, minister to the people there in Japan. It's directed by Martin Scorsese, excuse me. It also stars Andrew Garfield and Adam Driver, in addition to Liam Neeson, and is 2 hours and 40 minutes long. So it is an epic, if you will. Let's start with general thoughts. What did you think about Silence, Andrew?
Oh, Aaron. This has been a 10-year journey for Martin Scorsese to get this film made.
Yeah.
He's gone through a plethora of actors who signed on, dropped off, and he's put his heart and soul into making this. We have been waiting 3 years exactly for Martin Scorsese to make his newest film, and it has finally arrived.
Now, is that a didn't like it, or is that just it was okay?
Okay, so I'll say this. Because Scorsese is ascended beyond direct. He's up there potentially in the discussion of greatest director of all time.
Yeah.
Like, for any general movie, it's an okay movie.
Uh-huh.
As far as Scorsese movie goes, it's a bad movie.
Okay.
So, but for general, like, every movie, it's an okay movie.
I really liked it.
You did?
I really did. I really liked it. And I wonder if a lot of that has to do with my Christian roots, my Christian background, with kind of getting a look at what missionary work would have been like in the 17th century, and the idea of sacrifice and faith and martyrdom. All that stuff means a lot to me. Like it's very deep for me. And I imagine this movie would be very different for someone who doesn't connect to the quote unquote religious aspect of it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I did go on a whole bunch of mission trips when I was younger.
Yeah?
I did a lot. So I don't know if, like, since I'm not religious anymore, I don't know if that affected my general thoughts on the film or anything like that. But getting more into detail about my thoughts on the film, I'll start with positives, I guess, because that's normally what we do.
Go for it.
I'll start with this. Performance by Andrew Garfield and several of the Japanese actors are outstanding. Like, he was super good in this. I don't know if his performance is on the par with his Hacksaw Ridge performance, which we got this exact same year, but I thought he did a really good job. It was also a very difficult role for any actor to pull off. I don't know about him playing a Portuguese person, because another thing about this movie is it went through a plethora of actors. Initially, his role was Benicio del Toro.
Yeah, which makes more sense for the actual origin of
Jesuit
these priests.
Portuguese priests.
Yeah, if they hadn't said they were Portuguese, this movie does not indicate in any way that they are Portuguese. They speak English. Instead of doing the subtitle thing, they decided just to do English. They look like Anglos as opposed to somebody from Portugal.
You've cast Liam Neeson, Adam Driver, and Andrew Garfield to play Portuguese.
Yeah,
but
they were great. The performances were really good.
Exactly. Even Adam Driver, who is starting to come into his own as an A-list actor now, gave a really good performance in this movie, albeit kind of wasted.
I totally disagree. His performance was okay,
not to the extent of somebody else in this movie as wasted,
right?
But I thought that for as much as I liked Andrew Garfield, I think that they should have switched their roles. I think that Adam should have played Andrew and vice versa.
It's hard to talk about without going into spoilers.
Exactly.
And there are so many aspects of this movie that just I'm not going to get to. I mean, there's just so many themes and emotions and different things. It is a very intricate, deep 2 hours and 40 minutes.
Yeah.
But I will say I completely understand the focus on Garfield's character as opposed to Driver's character because of what the movie was trying to say about faith and doubt. And I think Driver's character was supposed to be such an example of what Garfield wanted to be in some ways, but couldn't find himself to be.
Yeah.
So I get kind of how they played him.
What I mean is, I think that Adam Driver should have played Andrew Garfield's character, and that Andrew Garfield should have played. That's what I mean. I think that they were miscast on each other. That's what I mean.
Interesting. I think it could work either way. Yeah. But I thought they were both great.
You liked this movie a lot more than I did, obviously.
Yeah.
So what did you find in this that you really liked?
The themes are so beautiful. It's so easy for when you're talking about faith, and especially when you're talking about possible martyrdom, you're talking about what are you willing to sacrifice for what you believe, those kind of things. It's very easy to paint it with a very clear, broad brush. I felt like Scorsese here is really allowing the authenticity of what faith is. Allowing the authenticity of doubt to creep in, allowing the idea of where is God when you feel like he's silent, when he's not saying anything, when you're in such an extreme, case like this, and you feel like God is not present. How do you maintain some sort of faith in that? When do you throw in the towel? All those kind of things. And again, we can get deeper into some of the details when we talk spoilers in the spoiler cast.
Sure.
But just to say, the way he talks about those themes, I think, is so honest that I really, really loved it. Like, it's way too easy. You think about faith-based films, and they all just seem, I shouldn't say all, so many of them seem to be painted like everything, all lines are drawn clearly, and it's easy to know the right thing and the wrong thing, and that's just not the real world all of the time. And I thought I thought that the Japanese perspective in this movie was given really well.
Oh, yeah.
Despite the fact that there was, some brutal torture and violence and those kind of things, you understood their perspective and where they were coming from. And even, I believe, are led to feel agreement with them in some of these ways about, why is it so important for Christianity to come here? We didn't ask for it, those kind of things.
Yeah.
So, I love that balance. I really do, because I think it allows for a more honest...
They treat it as an invasion.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that's... I think all that adds to me having a really good intellectual experience with the movie. Something really to think about and feel and kind of discover in those ways.
Yeah.
So I think that was one. Another thing I loved is the way Scorsese decided to do the sound in this movie. We mentioned that silence is a big part of this, the crickets, those kind of things. I don't think there is no score in this movie.
No,
it's
none.
just ambient sound.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the white noise my wife listens to sleep at night. You know what I mean? And that's kind of that's purposeful and beautiful, and the visuals in this movie were really gorgeous.
Maybe that's
as well.
why I didn't appreciate this movie, is because I thought that this movie could have been taken to a new level had it had a score. Just call it a different, doesn't have to be called silent. I get what he was going for. I don't know if it worked.
That's a great point. That's the risk of art, right? That's the risk of taking a risk with your art.
Yeah.
And Scorsese has the ability to do that because it's Scorsese. He can do what he wants.
Exactly.
So, he decided to make it a little arty in that way. And I think it works in some areas. I think it doesn't work in other areas.
It didn't feel like a Scorsese movie at all.
It just didn't feel like a movie as you interpret how a movie generally feels in modern, filmmaking.
Because when you think of Scorsese, you think, Cape Fear, you think The Departed, you think all these big gangster movies, Wolf of Wall Street, you think Goodfellas, you think all these. This is a total new turn for him. You could tell it was a passion project, something he's wanted to do for a while.
By the way, not sure if you're aware, but that's a great pun. Passion project, because passion is a very Catholic word.
Man, you are good at picking out unintentional puns.
He had another passion project, though, literally, and as we're talking, with Last Temptation of Christ. Very similar.
Yeah, the Willem Dafoe movie.
Very similar thing going on here, where he takes something central to his Catholic upbringing and says, what if something else had happened? Do you feel like, just as these men were dealing with doubt, that movie asks, could Jesus have dealt with doubt? Could he have dealt with temptation, those kind of things? Would he have imagined what, stepping down off the cross might have felt like?
Yeah.
And he got hammered by the Christian church of the day, boycotts and all sorts of things. And it always surprises me, because if you actually look at that movie,
it's not a slandering.
No, it's not. It's not against the church at all. It just asks,
hypothetical.
What if God thought about this? What if Jesus thought about this? Which I think is a really interesting thing to consider. But anyways, that's beside the point. I just say that to say he has kind of gone down this road a little bit before.
Yeah. Another thing I really liked about this movie, the authenticity of capturing the time and the culture is incredible. The attention to detail with the clothing and the costumes, and it's some of the best I've seen in any film in years.
I totally agree. Yeah, I would absolutely want to bring that up as well. It feels, I love it when a movie feels like somebody dropped a camera in a different era and just recorded. Now, the only difference is obviously they wouldn't have all been speaking English like this, but
that's
at the same time, it does feel very authentic.
Because there are Japanese actors, and I don't think there's a single one who isn't like, an American Japanese playing, like these are all true Japanese actors. And I think that some of them were some of the best performances in the film.
Oh, I agree.
There's one character that keeps coming back into the film, a Japanese actor. He was remarkably good, and I want to actually see some of the other films that he's done because he was so good.
Yeah.
Yeah. One last thing I had in the pros is that there are times, even though I didn't love this movie, where this movie evokes pure tension and just uncomfortableness, and it's hard to ignore and look away from.
Agree, and we'll get more into that during spoilers as well. Let's talk about some of the stuff that kind of detracted from the movie. I'll just go ahead and mention the length. I think it could have been much shorter. It didn't. I mean, I know he's making the movie he wants to make, and you don't have to make it all modern cinema, but there's no reason for some of these scenes to go on as long as they do, or to even be left in. It just feels like this could have been a much tighter film.
This film has about 45 minutes, for me, of absolute pure boredom. I
totally get that.
Exhausted by how long this movie was. There were times where I found myself looking at my watch and thinking of other things I could be doing, and I actually started cooking dinner while I was watching this movie.
Cursing that lousy podcast co-host of yours who made you watch it.
No, you didn't force me to watch a Martin Scorsese film, I'll tell you that right now.
That's true.
But okay, let's talk about that. I was bored and thinking of other things and actually doing other things during a first-time viewing a Martin Scorsese film.
Yeah.
And I think that says a lot, honestly.
It feels undisciplined in some ways. It feels self-indulgent to include so much of that stuff that just didn't feel necessary.
Exactly. I find myself like looking at his other movies, and we keep bringing them up, like Gangs of New York, and I think about I can watch this movie anytime I wanted to.
Sure.
I never want to watch this movie again.
Right.
Ever. What about you? You had some cons, I imagine.
That was it. That was
your one con?
really my my main con. We'll just call it the long con.
Yeah.
It is.
Oh man, you punny man.
I do think. I don't know that the violence is gratuitous. It is. I mean, it is violent for sure. Extremely violent, and that's I think the only reason it's really rated R. Yeah, there's a couple parts that get gory, but I don't feel like the violence is unnecessary. But I do feel like it's worth mentioning. Yeah, because if it's something you're uncomfortable with, it's definitely
not a con.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't put it in the con category. It's just a warning.
Yeah, I think that Liam Neeson was phoning it in.
I can see that. Man, I don't know that he has that next level though. For a movie like this, I don't know if he can do what we would want him to do.
So do you think he was miscast?
I think he was more miscast than phoning it in. I think that's what I would say.
Okay, because his character was, because he's on the box cover, he's the only person, and you think
that's true.
And you
true.
think,
I didn't think
man,
about that.
He's going to be given a stellar Oscar-worthy performance. This is going to be the return of the Schindler's List, Liam Neeson, where he's giving Oscar-worthy performances, and it's the farthest thing from.
Yeah,
it's so droll.
Do you have one last thing?
Out of every single Scorsese film I have seen, this is the worst.
Okay, you would rank it right at the bottom
of ones I've seen.
I see. I wouldn't. Okay. But I would not. I also wouldn't rank it at the top, which we will get into later in this podcast.
Yeah, we will.
My one last thing would have to be that the title, in my opinion, is both a noun and a verb. It's referring to both the noun of the silence of God and also the verb of how governments silence religious opposition. Yeah. So that was something I really thought was interesting.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention in the chat that Hedrack says, so it ends with a lightsaber fight between Liam Neeson and Adam Driver, right?
Oh, yeah.
Qui-Gon and
Kylo Ren.
That's a fight I want to see.
Man. And then Spider-Man flings in.
That's right. All right, Andrew, let's move on to a movie you haven't seen, a movie called A Dog's Purpose.
What is the meaning of life? Are we here for a reason? Is there a point to any of this? And why does food taste so much better in the trash? This was me, and then this was me. Then I came back as this little guy. A lot of lives for one dog to live, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's start at the beginning.
I'm a new soul.
For me, it all began with a boy. His name was Ethan.
Bailey, 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 Bailey.
My name was Bailey, 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 Bailey.
So, A Dog's Purpose, Andrew.
Yeah.
Now, I mentioned I wanted to talk a little bit about kind of the update on the controversy with A Dog's Purpose.
Yeah, I heard about this update and I don't buy it.
Oh, you don't buy? See, this is the thing with this kind of stuff. I don't know who to believe. Here's where I came down, and feel free to chat however you want. It is an open forum. I found I'm talking about the producer's message that he sent out after, researching and trying to figure out what happened on his movie. I found it very convincing. It really feels like an edit job in something to make it look worse than it was. Now, both the producer and I would say it still doesn't make it okay. The idea of the dog being uncomfortable for that long, those kind of things. But he makes a good point in that, the dog was never thrown in the water, those kind of things. The dog chose to go in when it went in and all that. So I found it convincing, but you didn't.
I've heard credible sources saying that TMZ has been paid off to change the story. I'm not saying that's what happened, but I'm saying that is definitely something that they have done in the past. Like TMZ has broken a story and then they've taken hush money to change the story. And
I didn't even know that TMZ changed the story.
Yeah. Okay. So that's what I thought you were talking about.
No, I'm talking about the producer's
saying
response.
that it was edited. Like they moved.
There's a very concerted effort to make this look as bad as possible. Because there is an agenda on groups like PETA, those kind of things, to get animals out of movies altogether. So that's kind of what they're trying to do, which is, in my mind, is really ironic for a movie like this that is so pro-animal. The movie itself is.
So, general thoughts: like it, love it, hate it.
For the life of me, I couldn't help but like this movie. Okay. I went in expecting to think it was cheeseball and, I'm not going to enjoy this. And the controversy maybe had, skewed that a little bit.
Yeah.
But I have to say, puppies are cute, man.
Yeah. Puppy. Something everybody in the world can agree on. Puppies are
Breaking
cute.
news. Puppies are adorable.
Yeah.
Plus the way they have Josh Gad voice these dogs, and I don't think it's a spoiler to say that, it's several dogs that he voices throughout the movie.
Reincarnation, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a reincarnation kind of thing. And the way he voices them is so perfect because it's intelligent and emotional at the same time as being clueless to the actual universe of humans.
Yeah.
So it allows him to kind of play dumb about some stuff that's really interesting and feels really accurate to how I imagine the world would feel for a dog.
Yeah.
So I really liked that. I bought into it, and it allowed for a little bit of humor, those kind of things. So I did overall enjoy it. Plus, the other thing I really liked was thematically, it is really consistent. It is, you talk about a dog's purpose. They actually do answer the question that, a dog's purpose, according to this movie, thematically, is about companionship.
Yeah.
And story after story after story shows different ways that, quote unquote, man's best friend, offer that companionship to people. And I thought that was a really beautiful theme that carried out, throughout the movie. So you can tell that it comes from source material that was well thought out.
Yeah.
And I think they do a good job of kind of keeping that in there.
All right. I got some questions, unless you want to just give general discussions on pros and cons before we get into questions.
I'll throw out the cons, and then maybe you can ask your questions about the movie.
Okay.
I thought it was light in the action and humor category. There's a little bit of it there, but I wanted more. The only thing keeping me engaged were the themes and the adorable puppies.
Okay.
So occasionally there was some good action. Occasionally there was something to laugh at, but I wanted it to be a little more compelling in that way. So it's definitely not a perfect movie. There is a lot of that cheese factor to it, but that doesn't bother me as much as it bothers some people. So that is there as well. Go ahead, ask your questions.
Okay, so first one, hypothetical, had the whole controversy never come out. As some of our listeners know, I lost my dog last year, and it tore me apart.
Sure.
And Danae is talking about Madeline getting older and older and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So with a movie that deals with the death of dogs on multiple times, do you think it would be difficult for people like Danae or I to sit through this movie? Is it like heartbreaking in some parts?
Sure.
Really?
Yeah.
It would have been really difficult for us to sit through that.
I think because you're dealing with a world where the dog is reincarnated, that softens that a little bit. You know, that you don't feel the immense loss because the movie continues on that persona, that personality through other dogs.
Okay.
Having said that, every time there's a loss, and you're going to relate that to your own life. You're going to relate that to what you've been through. Absolutely, that could be emotional. Now, I don't always think that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
But if it's a place you don't want to be, then know that there certainly are those moments.
When you went and saw this movie, did you see it like? Where did you go to like a screening with just like theater personnel, or did you go like to an audience viewing of it?
It was an audience. There were probably a dozen people in there.
Do you think that this movie was hurt, like in your viewing? I know nationwide it's hurt box office wise, but did you feel that when you went in to see it? Do you think like, man, there could have been a lot more people here if this whole controversy
I don't know.
thing?
See, I don't know. I think this movie was always doomed a little bit to have low box office. I just don't know that there's a lot in it that is attractive to people when they know they're going into, I'll just say, an Old Yeller situation. They know they're going into a place, like you just talked about, where their heart's going to be, tore up a little bit. And so I don't know that this movie was ever going to be huge, but I think certainly it hurt it.
Okay. Last question. Josh Gad. I'm assuming he does a really good job in this. Does it feel like he's doing Olaf again, or does it feel like it's a genuine new character?
It's not Olaf.
Okay.
For sure not Olaf. His voice is distinctive. Okay. So if you fall into remembering, oh, that's Olaf, you're going to hear it. But no, I think it's completely different. Because
I just figured, Olaf was always sunny and happy and, nothing can get him down. I didn't know if that was like the same kind of character he plays in A Dog's Purpose. Like, hey, I'm just a dog. Life's great. Sort of thing. Okay.
No, I don't think you can say that.
Okay, great. One last thing.
One last thing about the movie, Dennis Quaid is not in it very much. So if you're going to see a Dennis Quaid movie,
Yeah.
Just a heads up.
Well, I
it's
think
not
the trailer.
his movie.
I think the trailer gives away what his character is. So
Does it?
Yeah.
See, maybe that's my one last thing. My son went with me, and he had a good time. He really liked the movie.
Oh, good. Have you ever had a dog? Have your kids ever had a dog?
Yeah, we've had a couple dogs.
Okay.
And his thing was that he already knew everything that was going to happen because he watched the trailer. When I asked if he wanted to come, he said, "Well, let me watch the trailer and see if I want to go." And he said that the trailer gave everything away. Just it's just another one of those things where it's like, man, it'd be a whole different experience if you didn't know exactly where it was going. But
maybe people should start taking that Zero Frames pledge.
The Zero Flames pledge would be good too.
Yeah. Unless you want to keep warm. Speaking of the Zero Frames pledge, spreading like a virus.
Like a wonderful, wonderful virus. Let's take a second just to thank the people who make this podcast and this podcast network possible. It is a crowdfunded podcast, which you can support at patreon.com/StudioDNA. Anybody who supports starting at $3 a month or more, so just $3 a month, gets access to every single episode of all the podcasts on the network, including bonus episodes that do not appear in other places. There's a podcast feed for you. You can just pop it right into your podcast player. All that stuff will come right to you. We could not do this show and the others on the network without you. Thank you so much for chipping in a little bit to make this possible. On to the Best Ever Challenge.
Indeed.
We're going to name the best ever movies of Martin Scorsese. So we'll do our top 5 since there's just the two of us. We'll start at number 5 and go to number 1. And if one of us mentions one that the other one has higher, we'll just yell Trump. And we'll wait to...
We gotta come up with a new word.
No, we don't. It meant that before he was around. And we'll put off talking about it till the higher ranked person is ready.
Yes.
Let's start at number 5, Andrew. The number 5 Martin Scorsese film.
Do you want to go first, actually?
Sure, Goodfellas.
Trump.
Okay, I figured you'd have it higher.
Yeah, just one higher, though.
I know most people would have this at number 1, probably.
I know, and that's why we said earlier in the podcast, I don't know if we said it in podcast proper or if we did it in the pre-show, we both said that we have really unique Scorsese
strange
lists.
Scorsese lists. And a lot of that comes from the fact that I'm not a huge gangster movie guy. And
really?
Many of his movies are gangster movies.
I think that his best work came later in his career, if that gives a hint as to where mine.
All right. We'll talk about Goodfellas later. Go ahead. What's your number 5?
The Aviator.
Trump.
Okay. Now I'm going to put down Goodfellas as my number 4.
Cool.
So, yep. A lot of people would have it. Not only is their number 1 Scorsese film, a lot of people have this as their favorite movie.
Yeah, top 10
ever.
movies of all time. Yeah.
It is in my top 100. But it's I think in the 60s. So it's a ways back there. But you talk about gangster noir films, this is the creme de la creme.
Oh, yeah, it's the definition.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And nobody does it better. Joe Pesci gives probably the greatest performance of his career, one of the greatest performances of all times.
Some of those scenes are just, they're magnetic, and the energy in them, it's incredible.
I want to talk about De Niro just a little bit here.
Sure.
So De Niro came onto the scene in The Godfather 2, and you talk about a performance that everybody says, oh, this is going to stand the test of times as the greatest gangster performance ever. And then he does Goodfellas.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, okay, he is now the official gangster actor, and that is what he got typecast as for the rest of his career until he did, Meet the Parents and stuff like that. And then his career took a turn. But, man, what a jaw-dropping, tension-filled roller coaster of a film.
Yeah, it really is. And if you're wondering why it only lands at number 5 on my list, it really has to do with the fact that so many of the scenes that I look at in this movie, I'm like, oh, that's awesome, or oh, that's amazing. I don't want to feel that way. I don't. These are bad people doing bad things, and I don't like that I get excited about it. And that's what gangster films. That's why they bother me in some ways, because I'm not good with that much anti in my anti-hero, if that makes sense.
It's kind of a it's a window into a world you don't want to be a part of.
Well, yeah, and it's a window into a world I don't want to celebrate, and I feel like the movie wants you to get excited about, you know, these things, or think they're cool or amazing, or, you know.
Yeah.
So it becomes difficult for
The
me in
whole
that
Rat
way.
Pack mentality.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, wouldn't it be cool to be, you know, that tough, and, you know.
It's just an escapism, you know, just to release
Sure,
all
I
that
get
tension.
listen, no judgment. I totally get it. I'm just telling you why I struggle
no
with
judgment to your no judgment.
judgment-free zone.
Yeah. Your number 4.
My number 4 is The Aviator.
Hey!
So we just had them swapped.
All right, go ahead.
I think this is an underrated movie.
Oh, isn't it?
I think Leonardo DiCaprio is incredible in it. I think the story of Howard Hughes is fascinating.
Man, what an interesting man.
Yeah, and I think it's played very well and always interesting. I really love The Aviator.
Every single one of these movies that we're mentioning here in the top 5 is in my top 100 movies of all time.
Wow.
I think that Scorsese is the director that shows up the most, besides maybe Nolan or Spielberg, in my top 100 movies of all time.
Hitchcock shows up the most in my top 100.
Yeah, that makes total sense for you. Yeah, I imagine I've seen your top 100. I can't make that joke now, but I thought that this should have been the performance to win DiCaprio his first Oscar.
I thought so too. I thought it was incredible.
And there's so many people that you don't even realize are in this movie, like Alec Baldwin and John C. Reilly.
Mm-hmm.
I love this movie, and I think that the 50s and the 50s, 40s is such a fascinating time in American history, and for them to just totally capture it is just extraordinary.
Yeah, I would highly recommend a rewatch if you haven't watched it in a while. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. All right, you want to go on to number 3?
Yeah.
This is where I have Gangs of New York.
Trump.
All right, continue then.
The Wolf of Wall Street.
Okay, talk about it a little bit.
So, I did not know what this movie was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the trailers and I thought, okay, yeah, it's going to be, you know, some guys, they get into a little bit of a little kerfuffle with the law, you know, with you know, how they laundered money or how they were, you know, kind of tinkering with the stock market and stuff. But when it turned into this lascivious, coked out orgy, I had no idea that it was going to be the type of movie it was.
Well,
and
it doesn't necessarily turn. I mean, you say turn into that. It starts there.
Okay,
like the opening scene is
when it turns out that it is a lascivious, coked out orgy.
Yeah,
and it's that for 2.5 hours. Is that how long the movie is?
It is. Yeah,
yeah. From beginning to end, this movie is in 4th gear, and it doesn't let off the gas at all.
And again, this I don't have it on my list because again, it's so hard for me to celebrate or, you know, kind of look up to these kind of things. But I have to say, like the moment where who is it? Kyle Chandler who plays the
Kyle
agent?
Chandler is the agent.
Yeah, he plays the agent. When he's on the boat talking to
scene.
That scene is incredible. Like, it is intense, well performed. You know,
could you just repeat that for me?
so good, so good. So I totally get the love for Wolf of Wall Street, even though it's not one of my favorites.
My favorite scene in that entire movie is the Popeye scene. It was one of the few scenes in a movie. I was sitting in the very back row. That's the only reason why I did this. Where I stood up in the theater and I did my surrender cobra thing where I put my hands on my head like, I can't believe this is happening.
Yeah.
And then the Popeye theme started and I'm like, Scorsese, you are a master of your craft.
Yeah.
So your number 3 was?
My number 3 was Gangs of New York.
Gangs of New York, and I trumped that. Okay.
Yeah.
And then mine was Wolf of Wall Street. So your number 2.
My number 2 is Hugo.
Hugo, ooh! I don't even have that in my honorable mentions. You know why?
I love
never
Hugo.
Seen it.
Oh, you've never seen Hugo?
Never seen Hugo.
I think it is. Here's the thing that most people will miss when they watch this now. It is brilliantly directed for 3D. It is one of those movies where the director is very intentionally using 3D as a tool and not a gimmick. And so
I wish I would have seen it.
Yeah, Scorsese doing 3D intentionally is pretty spectacular stuff. It's also a movie about the beauty and the magic of movies, so that gets to me. It's a movie about what it's like to see the world as a child. Some great performances in it. I think Hugo is fabulous. So that's my number 2.
Number 2, The Departed. you probably knew this. This movie is not original. It's based off of I think it's a Japanese movie, Infernal Affairs.
Okay.
Have you ever seen it?
No, I haven't.
I saw it, and Departed's way better.
Is it?
Yeah.
I didn't like Departed.
Oh, really?
I really didn't. I thought it was ridiculous.
I think it's number 15 in my top 100
Nice.
movies of all time.
Nice.
So
Yeah, it just wasn't for me. The performances didn't get me. I thought everybody sounded like they were doing some sort of put on.
Really?
Yeah.
Well,
Is Nicholson in that?
Yeah.
I just remember thinking Nicholson was ridiculous in
and
that.
I thought that was Nicholson's greatest
Well,
performance
there
he's
you
ever
go.
given his
That's
entire
how
career.
Two people see the
Because
same movie differently.
He's doing. It's based off of the Whitey Bulger character. You know that
Right.
Johnny Depp does in Black Mass. It's based off of that character.
Yes.
Every single person in this movie is from Boston, pretty much. Besides, I think like Alec Baldwin and Leonardo DiCaprio. And I just, I buy every single time that there's a movie about Boston. If it's not done right, you can feel like. And I'm not even from Boston. I've been to Boston once.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not Boston. I feel like I'm a Boston apologist, even though I've been like. But when whenever I see like Patriots Day, we just talked about how you feel Boston in that. I don't think there's a better example of that than The Departed. You get that strong Irish, no nonsense, I'll fight you mentality. And I think that I've never been more tense. And the ending of this movie is one of the most insane endings of any film ever.
Yeah.
I
agree.
Because I think I saw this movie in IMAX.
Did you?
And every single person, because if you've seen this movie, you know the ending. Every single person in the theater was like, what just happened? I can't follow it. And then once you think you start to come down from that, something crazy happens 3 seconds later, and then the credits roll.
Yeah.
And it does it like 15 times. Love it. I can't love this movie enough.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because the things that you have found to love are the things I rolled my eyes.
You rolled your eyes at. That's fascinating.
Yeah, I found it to be a little ridiculous.
Well, it won Best Picture. So,
so
I win.
You win.
You're number one.
Shutter Island.
I didn't like that movie.
See. Shutter Island.
Man.
It shouldn't be a surprise that Shutter Island would appeal to me as much of a Hitchcock fan as I am because it's a very Hitchcockian movie. I love the performances in it. I love the twist in it. I think it's I think it's brilliantly.
I'm glad you love it because I think that, and I don't mean to steal this from you, but I think that Scorsese trying something new, trying to do horror, and you being a Hitchcock fan, I think that's high praise for you to really appreciate it.
Yep.
So
yeah, absolutely, and because it's not, I didn't see it as horror at all. I saw it as thriller, suspense thriller kind of stuff, mystery thriller, and yeah, it worked for me. Yeah. Whatever Scorsese was doing there really worked for me.
Do you mind if I say the spoiler or the twist in that movie since it is as old as it is? I'll say this.
Sure. Just jump.
I'm not gonna say.
I was gonna say people can just jump forward 30 seconds and you can say it.
So I saw this movie with one of my best friends, Zach. 5 minutes into the movie, we looked at each other and we said the twist.
Yeah,
we knew it was coming, and it kind of ruined the rest of the movie for us.
That can happen for sure.
So we're like, we know what's going on here.
Well, especially when you're ahead of a movie, it becomes less interesting.
Yeah, but 5 minutes in. We knew it.
That's quite a bit ahead of the movie.
Yeah. So we just sat there through the rest of the movie, and just a couple of jump scares got us. And we're not saying that the performances were bad. I think that DiCaprio gives a really good performance, and so does Mark Ruffalo. He gives a super good performance in this movie. And that's your number one movie. And now that you say that it gives you vibes of Hitchcock, I understand why. My number one, I trumped you early on.
Yeah.
Gangs of New York. Not only my number one, but it's my second favorite movie of all time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Only beaten by
The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
So, so much of this has to do with Daniel Day-Lewis for me.
Yep.
Wow. That man, I don't know what he goes through to get himself buried in his performances.
Have you seen, he's done several now, but he's done several things he talks about his craft. And how he tells any director, if you want me to be in your movie, you have to give me 3 years to get into character.
Yeah.
And that's no joke. He immerses himself for 3 years. Like, he became a butcher, and he lived that New York mentality, and one of the greatest performances ever.
Yeah, it's
and the fact he didn't
insane.
win an Oscar is mind-numbingly.
He should win an Oscar every time he puts on his work boots. Like, he's that good.
That he makes himself because he's a cobbler. Did you know that?
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, he's an actor part-time. He has a full-time job as a cobbler in Ireland. So I want to buy some Daniel Day-Lewis shoes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The movie's long. It's real over 3 hours long.
But I don't think it feels its length.
No, it doesn't. Daniel Day-Lewis's character is so villainous and pure evil to the point you love him. Like, you love every second he's on screen. And
captivated.
You're captivated, and you're just, this presence that he has is intoxicating, even to a point where to DiCaprio's character, who has more reason to hate him than anybody else, finds himself fascinated by this man.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. And I think that Cameron Diaz gives a performance that is outstanding. DiCaprio, of course. This is whenever DiCaprio and Scorsese really start to connect. I think you start to see there's going to be a relationship between these two that's going to span the test of time, and they are going to. And I wish that would have been the same case with Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah,
but Daniel Day-Lewis only does 10 films. So, but and the period, I don't think this period in time is done enough. And maybe that's something else that we kind of talked about when we talked about Silence, is the fact that Scorsese has a way of capturing the time that he sets his movies in.
That is the other thing about that movie that really stood out to me, was how the authenticity of it, yeah.
And him being a New Yorker, he had to have gotten that movie right. He's not allowed to mess it up. Did you have anything you wanted to say about it?
No, I said my two main things, Daniel Day-Lewis and the authenticity of the era, those absolutely fascinating in that movie, and it's hard to ignore.
I have some honorable mentions that we would get ostracized if we didn't mention. Casino.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a hard movie to watch.
Yeah.
That's a really hard movie to watch. Cape Fear, one of De Niro's best performances. What did you think about Raging Bull?
I think Raging Bull's a great movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a huge boxing movie fan, and I thought this movie was just okay. And I know that is blasphemy, not only as a film critic, but as a boxing movie.
Well, it's so much more concerned with the humanity of, like,
how he treats.
Yeah, how he's treating, rather than the actual boxing.
Yeah.
I mean, the boxing is in there, but the film is much more concerned with what it means to be human.
Yeah. And then we would be remiss if we didn't mention Taxi Driver.
Yeah, that's the one that kicked it all off for him, right? That was kind of the first one that at least people pay attention to.
Not only him, but also Jodie Foster, her very first role ever was in Taxi Driver.
That's right. Good discussion. I didn't realize you were such a Scorsese film guy.
Yeah, I am. And it really hurt me a lot when I didn't like Silence as much as I wish I did.
Now, if we're talking Scorsese acting roles, I'm partial to the movie Quiz Show. So
Quiz Show. I got to look up now what...
Robert Redford directed Quiz Show about the scandals and the quiz shows, and Ray Fiennes is in it. It's a great Turturro's in it. I love it. It's actually one of my favorite movies of all time.
30 Rock.
But what?
His 30 Rock performance.
That's your favorite acting performance?
Yeah.
Nice. Let's get to some buried treasure. What do you got, Andrew?
So it's not really buried. It's not really hidden. It's out there in the world right now, and a lot of people are playing it. But you know me, I got to do a video game. Resident Evil 7. If you are a fan of horror games, or if you're a fan of the Resident Evil franchise of old, I'll give you a little... Did you ever play the Resident Evil games?
No.
I didn't imagine you would. But I didn't want to say... No, Aaron, you obviously don't play those. But
that's fine. You can say that.
Aaron, you obviously don't play the Resident Evil games.
I don't.
So if you're a fan of survival horror, and what I mean by that is inventory management, meaning you don't get to keep a lot of stuff on you.
Okay.
One of the things that horror games recently have lost is the fact that they'll give you like infinite ammo and it's just jump scares. What horror games used to be is you have 9 bullets on you and the enemy needs 15 to kill. So you're going to waste, and you got to make sure you hit every single one of those with 9 bullets, and then you got to go find more ammo while this thing is chasing you.
Sure.
This game finally recaptures what it means to be a survival horror game. And Resident Evil used to be the creme de la creme, the staple of what it used to be for those horror games. Then it got thrown into the media maelstrom, and it became just gory blood and guts, and it wasn't scary anymore, and people were really upset with Capcom. Like, you forgot what your own game is supposed to be about. And then they came out with this, E3.
Mm-hmm.
E3 had this trailer, or a playable teaser, that was just entitled The Kitchen. And everybody's like, you know what, this is going to be the scariest game of all time. The Kitchen is going to be the scariest game of all time. And then last E3, it was revealed that The Kitchen was actually going to be Resident Evil 7. And people are flipping out like, oh, so maybe they do know what's going on, but it's first person. You know, first person being the perspective of the gameplay. And people are like, well, Resident Evil's never been first person. How is this going to play as first person? It doesn't feel like it's going to be good. It's one of the best Resident Evil games I've ever played. And I cannot recommend, if you love horror games or survival horror, I cannot recommend it enough to anybody. Now, Sean, who is watching, if he's still there, yeah, he is. He is playing this on PlayStation VR. And he could probably tell you that...
Now, that I've heard a little more about, that the VR on it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, that is actually heightens it up to an even scarier experience. And I remember when he started playing the game, he was texting me every 5 minutes, are you telling me that this just happened in the game? How am I supposed to get past this part? And it was so fun because even over text, I could tell that he was loving this game.
Yeah.
So I can't recommend enough, and I'm sure that Sean, who was also somebody who has been a geek or guru on this show multiple times, would recommend it as well.
Very good. My Buried Treasure, someone asked me recently what my favorite underseen Hitchcock movie was. And so I thought I'd give my answer for Buried Treasure today. If you're wanting to know about Hitchcock movies other than like Vertigo and Psycho and some of the big names, I'd highly recommend you go check out Shadow of a Doubt. It is incredible stuff. I think 1941, so I think it was made in the 40s. Joseph Cotton is in it. He's incredible. It really is, I think, where Hitchcock zoned in completely on his formula and who he wanted to be and how he wanted to make movies. So if you're thinking about, maybe you want to do a little Hitchcock research, maybe you want to do a little Hitchcock viewing party, Shadow of a Doubt is a great place to start. I think it holds up. And if you don't like Shadow of a Doubt, then maybe Hitchcock isn't, old Hitchcock isn't for you. But if you do enjoy it, then you can kind of start going down that rabbit trail and watching Lifeboat and Rope and all these other older Hitchcock movies that don't get mentioned as much. So I wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I've never even heard of it, but I wrote it down on my phone. I'm going to check it out.
Shadow of a Doubt. Notorious is another good one. Sorry, I can't stop. When it comes to Hitchcock, it just keeps happening.
You know what? I don't even want you to stop because I'm not going to lie. I've only seen like 4 Hitchcock films.
I have often thought about doing like a Hitchcock day. And
if you have a Hitchcock day, please let me know. I would love to come over for a Hitchcock day.
That would be a lot of fun. Which ones have you seen?
Birds. I don't even know if I've seen Vertigo all the way through.
Okay.
Psycho, obviously. I've never seen North by Northwest all the way through.
Wow.
And I know that's your favorite movie of all time. But
it's in my top 5 at least.
Is it not Rear Window? What's it called?
Yeah, Rear Window.
Oh, Rear Window. I've seen Rear Window. Love that movie.
Yeah.
And wow, is that it?
It could be.
It could be. I know I've seen Birds multiple times because I love that movie. And Psycho I've seen multiple times. So yeah, I need you to educate me, Aaron.
All right, maybe I'll put together like a list of 6 or so, and we'll take a full day and just watch a bunch of Hitchcock movies. Who knows? That everybody's invited. All right, throw my address out on the internet. Just show up. We'll have a good time. We did it, man.
Yeah, we did.
We did a podcast.
Yeah,
podcasting has happened.
Good times had by all.
Thanks so much for joining us today. Siftpop is part of the Studio DNA Podcast Network. You can find out more about other live and later shows on the network by following the feed at mixler.com/studiodna. That's mixlr.com/studiodna. Huge thanks to Andrew Ormsby for joining me again this week.
Oh,
Andrew,
thank you.
what you got going on over at Flick Freaks these days?
Doing a lot of live streams, Let's Plays. So right now I'm going back and I'm playing my old favorite classic games, like PlayStation 1 games. We just finished Final Fantasy VII, and pretty soon we're going to be starting Brave Fencer Musashi. So if you're younger and you just want to know, like, hey, what were some of the old games that came out on like PlayStation 1 or the original Xbox, I'm doing a bunch of those right now. And come Valentine's Day, I'm doing a 24-hour live stream.
Ooh, nice.
Yep. So if you don't have anything special going on and you just want to hang out, swing by. It's going to be streamed live on both YouTube and Twitch.
Very nice. I've got at yourmoviefriend.com, we'll have my top 41 movies of 2016 coming out this week, as well as my top 100 movies of all time update for this year. So see if any of the movies of 2016 cracked my top 100. Hint, they did.
More than one?
Let's not give that away yet.
Okay.
Let's not give that. We'll just go with a strong maybe.
Okay.
On that one. Also, a couple podcast appearances coming up for me that you may want to check out. I will be on Sincast again here in the next couple weeks, talking the best movies of 2016. Speaking of that, and also on the Horrible Movie podcast again, talking about the movie Ishtar. So. If you want to check that out, you can search for Horrible Movie Podcast in your podcast
I really
player.
got to get on with those guys. It sounds like the funnest podcast.
They have a good time. They have a good time. Also, much love and gratitude to our Patreon supporters for giving monthly to make this show and others on the network possible. Support starts at $3 a month. Comes with some pretty fun perks. You can find out more at patreon.com/studiodna. Also, if you wouldn't mind commenting and rating us at your podcast player of choice, that can be a big help to the podcast. Let other people know that it exists and where to listen to it. Also, if you have anything else you want to know, anything else that you want on the show, any feedback, any of that kind of stuff, feel free to email us. Our email is feedback@siftpop.com.